My goddamn fridge is on. Ruins the sound. I guess that's what you... But, whatever. Okay. Yeah, so what? My fridge is on. Is that much of a problem? Sometimes I'll open the podcast and, I'll go through. I record it. I go through and I edit it. And then when I edit it, I'm I'm looking at the beginning of my podcast. Because I'm like, oh, this beginning, it kind of blows. I don't know. I didn't start it off well. I didn't get enthusiastic enough at the beginning. I wish I had a different beginning, but, I'm not going to re-record one. And so I'm just staring at, one beginning where I can leave it the way it is, or I can just cut off, the first two words I said or something. And that's the change that I'm pondering. And then I'm trying to figure out which one I like better for a long time, and I'm like, well, you better figure it out, because neither one of these is good. Neither beginning is good. I need to tell my dog to sit nicely sometimes, because just if he's not sitting nicely, it's important. It's important for him to know that I'm the authority. But in actuality, I guess that's the point, or I mean part of it. It's whatever. You do different, it's whatever. You have different authority styles for being an authority, I would say. Authority is necessity as much as is a necessity as much as I would rail against it. So it's I'd be sitting over a couple different beginnings for my podcast, which both of them sound pretty much the exact same. But I'm like, oh, which one? And then I'm like, well, you have to, that's the one thing standing in the way between me and just uploading it. And I'm like, oh, I don't, it's just kind of an excuse to, I don't really know. That's a decision I have to make, even though both of them sound the same and both aren't good, because it's the intro, it's whatever. It's because, but it's not that the intro actually sounds bad. I'm just comparing it to, well, your intro needs to be it has to pop or something. It has to be opening and enthusiasm, the way you see other people do. They show a lot of pride in themselves right up front. That's the way it's supposed to sound. You're supposed to have you're supposed to be very proud of it in the beginning and all the way through and at the end. And people get on you if you're not selling them on it or something, or at least that's something I could think about as a critique of what it would sound like, is people can get on you for it, for you not being, for you not selling yourself in any given moment, not just in a podcast, but just in regular life. You're supposed to come at everything with this unbridled enthusiasm, as if you're really proud of what you're doing in any given moment, as if that's real life. I'm really proud of me having this conversation with you or something. That's something for me that I should be enthusiastic about, so that I represent myself well or something. I'm supposed to represent myself well in the world, when it's difficult to have enthusiasm for conversations that are just naturally unenthusiastic, or just aren't. I don't have the motivation to be excited about basic conversations. I don't think you should. Anyway, that's the reason that they're basic conversation. It's a basic conversation. I'm bringing that amount of enthusiasm to it. The same as intro or outro, because an intro or an outro is the same as talking anyway. It's just that I think I have to do an intro that sounds like an intro because it's an intro, but just that we define an intro makes it so that you're oh, it is different from the body of it, but we have these categorizers to explain this is the intro part of it, and because it's given that title, there's something different expected out of it than just the regular message. So, but I mean, that's my typical message, but I'm going to bring the amount of enthusiasm to a basic conversation as it calls for, as basic as the conversation is. If it's small talk, then that is not something to get excited about. I'm not going to try to represent myself well in that conversation, or tell you what's really exciting going on in my life. The point of the conversation is to exchange boring pleasantries. There's no how do you expect me to get more than just this monotone for a regular conversation with you, because you're not excited about it. But like it would stem from that I would think that the other person is actually not interested in what I'm talking about. If I was going to continue to be monotone, it's not like a regular conversation can't transform into something better, but it would be your belief that the other person is not actually interested in you that would cause you to not try to transform it into something better. But that's on you. It's always on you. It's on, if you're being weak ass in a conversation, you're just being sorry about it, that's on you. Like, it is, you shouldn't be sorry about yourself. You should be like, any conversation or any could be a more interesting one, or like you could get to know the person and realize that there's a reason for you to have a relationship with them rather than just the basic stuff, because obviously it's the basic stuff. It's just like that society works that way, that I have to start with this basic level where I can't really turn on the enthusiasm up front. Like might take me a minute. It probably just means that society needs to be more patient with me or something like that, because I'm more off and on or something. I'd be more off and on with my levels of enthusiasm in a basic conversation. So like it would take a minute for me to really get to a point where I can talk to a person that I'm like interested in the conversation, because at the beginning the conversation is actually not interesting, but it can be, I guess, is the point. I guess that's why people talk to each other, and so that's why people talk to each other, and that's finally about conversations, or the level of enthusiasm you're supposed to bring to a conversation. You don't want to be a weak ass in a conversation. So yeah, like, you don't want to be weak ass in a conversation, and sometimes like you're the kind of person that you're just weak ass up front no matter what. Like, even not just in a basic, like you're waiting for a single conversation with somebody to develop to a point where you're interested about it. Like, it takes you some time to be interested in something or to build up any sort of enthusiasm. Like, or that kind of like the energy, it takes a minute for the energy to rev up or something. You can be that kind of person, and it doesn't just apply to a conversation. It applies to like long-term friendships or something. Like, you can't even be friends with somebody up front, like people that you're aiming to be friends with, and so then the people that you're trying to be friends with don't even realize that you're being friends with them until like a year in or something. Like, your relationships with people can develop the same way. I mean, it's probably the case that someone like me, I am describing a pattern that persists in lots of areas in my life. Like, people are kind of consistent like that, or at least they have things about them that are consistent. Not that you would be able to tell them, not that you would be able to see those really about other people. You can see a consistent thing like that in yourself, but and realize that it's probably reflected in other people. Like, there's just people that it would take them time to rev up. Like, even it would take them years to like really have the enthusiasm of being friends with people or something that they've been hanging out with for a while. But like, that's just like the conversation you'd have with somebody who would eventually be your friend, where you take too long to even show that you're interested in the conversation, is a microcosm of the kind of relationships you have, right? That's just what's going on. That's just what's happening that's just a microcosm of your thing, that you are microcosmically what you proceed to be in the world. Like, not in all cases, but like that I'm just saying, picture that a regular conversation you have is a picture of your entire life. But like, how do you carry about in a regular conversation? Maybe that's a microcosm for your relationships with everybody, just like what a typical like conversation with a stranger, or that you would see that as what happens in the beginning of a relationship, or at the beginning of, but I guess I'm talking about if you're whatever, it's you basically know what I'm talking about. You sort of at least know what I'm talking about. I just wanted to say that we watched the term cancel culture. I feel like we're watching it evolve rapidly before our eyes. And that's kind of interesting, because when cancel culture as a term first developed, and who knows how long it's really been developing, it's probably been around for like 15 years or something really unexpected like that. Like, people have been using it off and on, and now boom, here it is. Cancel culture. It's a term, like, cancel culture is the 2020s fake news, like fake news of 2016. Like, does one of these terms have to come up and be present in everybody's conversations and in our lives entirely, be part of what we're doing to the extent that we can't escape it, like every time there's an election year. Does it have to happen that way? Like I'm saying, this election year's cancel culture 2016 was fake news, but it's interesting the way that the term evolves, like cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. Here's the point that I'm going to tell you, and here's the point. Here's what I wanted to say. Cancel culture, I wanted to say what the point was. I can't wait to tell you what the reason I started talking about cancel culture was. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to be like, it's going to be beyond what you even wanted to say. But who needs to hear about that? Let's talk about something else. It's time to talk about something else besides cancel culture, because I was already talking about that and didn't get to the point of what I was saying. Okay, but I guess you probably want to hear the point. Cancel culture, what I was saying was the term evolves, interestingly enough. Like a couple of years ago, I'm going to say like cancel culture as a term was around a couple of years ago, and it's just like, yes, cancel culture was around a couple of years ago, and you know that it's just like, oh, do you want me to tell you what the point is? It's really sad that you need me to tell you what the point of what I was saying. Like, I'm not thinking about something else already. That's too bad. So what am I going to do? Blame that on society? Society makes me tell them what I'm thinking. They make me coherently line it up in words so that they understand the point. Like, society wants a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And then so that they understand what I was trying to talk about with cancel culture. I'm telling you that. So it's like, sometimes I get to the middle and it honestly stresses me out that people want me just to deliver a point when it's like, but it's not a problem in society that they want me to do that. But I think society would also tell you that, like, oh, you're just lying, or you're just trying to have fun. Like, this isn't a real person. Like, society will tell me, like, a real person doesn't not get to the point, then they're just fucking around. It's just like, no, maybe it just gives me anxiety to have to deliver on a story. But anyway, so I could talk about my own whatever, like, word revolution, like just spit out words about nonsense about trying to think about the anxiety that it gives me to think about thinking about things, or considering what anxiety makes me think about, so that I don't go through with what I'm trying to say, but that that I'm speaking about not thinking about things expressively enough. You know, if I were to think expressively enough to express the expression entirely, so that the full extent of the expression was spoken, then you'd know what I was talking about. Then you'd know that the point ended. So I'm talking about cancel culture. Isn't that wild? I'm talking about cancel culture. Holy shit. Oh my God. That's fucking fascinating, isn't it? Wow. Is that what you're talking about? See, like, it's like a self, like, oh, you would, like, I would make fun of myself for bringing up a point. So now I'm not bringing enthusiasm enough, and I'm not representing myself well. I'm not representing myself the way that I'm supposed to. Like, I guess I just don't have the level of pride in myself, enthusiasm to bring to this conversation this conversation that I'm having. So, no. And then you'll tell me that this isn't even a person. That's just like, you're just fucking around or whatever. But that's not something you blame on society. Do you see how I just like cycled back through the same whatever? At least that's just the place my mind is in right now. It's just like boom, 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 just like rotating back through the same phrases over and over again, not even getting to the point. Just like, why does it do that? It's like a Ferris wheel. It's fascinating. But is it? No, it's not. Oh, I'm fascinating. No, I told you. I mean, that's me representing myself well. I just told you genuinely that I thought I was fascinating. That came out of my mouth. But this is as self-indulgent as it gets. So I apologize for that. But aren't I fascinating? But obviously, but obviously I am. It's just like so fascinating. It's like so fascinating. Anybody that would even pretend that they weren't like stuck on it that way is actually has problems with narcissism. I'm telling you that right now. Like, don't tell me I'm not narcissistic. Like, if I dwell on that, like, oh, I'm self-indulgent, I keep being self-indulgent, that's what I am, ha ha ha, I'm self-indulgent. At least I am that for a moment. I'm going to be self-indulgent as long as it passes through my brain so that I can talk about the idea. I mean, it's just an idea, but the idea is just a feeling, and I'm communicating the feeling. I'm just communicating the feeling of being self-indulgent, or like whatever, trying to represent myself well or something, like having the right level of enthusiasm to bring to the conversation. So it's all connected in some way. But it's just that I was more interested in what I was talking about before, but that's what I was gravitating towards naturally in my brain, because that's the place that my brain is. My brain is naturally in a place where I didn't want to talk about cancel culture. It's just that I had predetermined that that's what I was going to talk about, and so now I have to deliver the point, like the story of it. But that's how you adapt. That's how you live in society. That's how you make it at all. You have to say things. It's just that the podcast format is forgiving, so it's just like you can be whatever. You can be a lunatic as long as you want. Just say nonsense. It's like, just be recorded, upload it, there you go. Just speak your mind, but your mind can just be gibberish, and just speak your mind endlessly and then upload it, and it doesn't matter. You can just be lunatic podcast 1, lunatic podcast 2, and then you're just like, but as long as it's you recording aimless conversation, stream of consciousness out of your fucking brain, doesn't it's not, who's going to be any the wiser? It's just like, people could think that you were trying to develop it that way, because people fill in the gaps wherever they want, as long as they're trying to understand you to be a person. Because if they give you the credit to be a person, they'll be like, well, that did come out of a person, so it had to be, it wasn't just like a gibberish person. But like, they can also write you off and say that no, you were not that for whatever reason, because you're too this way, whatever. It's not like, but whatever. But it's just like, oh, he's like too caffeinated, or what? He's on LSD or something. Like it could be anything. You just tell me I'm not a person. That's all it is. It's like people don't even. That's the whole thing. It's like people don't even. Okay, but cancel culture, we're currently discussing cancel culture. Like, I was watching Ben Shapiro, and he was saying that, well, he's talking about cancel culture the way that we're using the term now, which is to describe people which is to describe like the canceling of people via SJW types on Twitter and that kind of thing. And it's like, the more that I get into the story of it, the more that I think that like I'm upset, more that I think that I'm being too loud, or I get paranoid about my neighbors, honestly. And that's always been the case. That's always been the case every episode. Every time I just get more into predetermined story, I get more paranoid. What's the reason for that? I'm just telling you, get the God's honest truth. I get more paranoid the more that and then I'll listen to this later, and I'll probably edit out anything that's interesting about it, like anything that was interesting, where I was just saying unnecessary things about me being too paranoid for like starting a story. It's like, if I go into the predetermined part of it, it's like I feel like it's not organic enough, and that people are going to poke holes in it or something. Like that's a problem that I have. But it's only when I don't actually deliver on the story. Delivering the story isn't that hard. It's just that I have fun sometimes. It's fun to not be within a format. It's fun to not have to go into the story of explaining the point of cancel culture. But like, is that fun for the listener? Probably not. Maybe for a certain kind of listener. Maybe for a conservative. Certainly not for a liberal. A conservative likes to be imaginative, or probably likes to hear about other people's imaginations, but a liberal doesn't really live in imagination, but that's because they're happier, I would say. Like, a liberal is happier because you're like a liberal is happier. I'd say that a conservative fundamentally does not want to enter into happiness, because happiness is too easy. Because happiness is like, that's when things become too simplified, and like conservatives would rather live in their own imaginations. But I'm going to do an episode about liberals, conservatives. I'll explain what I mean in that episode. But okay, so Ben Shapiro is talking about a certain kind of person that's getting canceled. Like, there's this woman that had cornrows, that got canceled by cancel culture, quote unquote. At least that's what Ben Shapiro was applying the term to. Like, she got canceled, but there's people that, because she worked somewhere, she had a business, and it's like the SJWs were pretty much like canceling her business, or at least her as the figurehead of the business or whatever. But anyways, I say that to explain that the term cancel culture is applied to like SJWs on Twitter that are canceling conservatives, but not just conservatives, but anybody that is offending them. Like, anybody that's getting offended is just getting taken down on Twitter. Like, it's like we're applying the word cancel culture just to describe anybody that gets attacked vociferously on Twitter. Interestingly enough, because like cancel culture, at least we're watching the term evolve really rapidly in front of our eyes, because I feel like not that long ago, cancel culture was, at least when it was first coming up to gain popularity across society, at least when it first was coming up and gaining popularity in society, here's what it did, and here's what it did, here's what it did, and here's what it did. See, I'm about to lose it. I'm like teetering on the tracks like a roller coaster or something, and it's about to go way off it's about to go way off the tracks or whatever. It's about to shoot off into space. Like it's not tethered down. Like, my brain is not tethered down. I don't want it to be tethered down, but it is tethered down anytime you're taking the time to explain a story, to relate yourself. So you're like, either you listen to all that, or you're like, God, I can't even shut the fuck up. And then you are out after 2 minutes. So that's one of the two. Anyway, like, whatever. Like, are you going to not recognize somebody who's self-indulgent? That's just my opinion of that kind of delivery. It's like, that's not sustainable, so I only go into it sometimes. Okay, that kind of delivery where I'm just like, the consciousness, or me talking about the consciousness, is not sustainable because it's self-indulgent, rubs people the wrong way. But I'm guessing in moderation, it's probably fine. Anyway, so we're explaining cancel culture to be, you know what it is. You know what it is. But you don't exactly know what it is. I'm trying to add an opinion to it. But like, we use it so widespread, the term is so ubiquitous, that we apply it just to anybody who's getting taken down on Twitter or getting a lot of hate on Twitter, when like I feel like that's not really accurate applying of the term, especially because when it was first gaining popularity, it was just meant to describe people in entertainment. Like, we were using cancel culture to describe YouTube personalities that got canceled overnight because of something they said, which is like, yeah, they got taken down by Twitter too. They like all the canceling pretty much does happen through Twitter. Pretty much, like, all the cancel culture canceling does happen through Twitter. Like, that's pretty much every time that we're applying it, we are talking about somebody who's getting a lot of Twitter hate. But it's like, it's evolved just to describe anybody who's getting lots of Twitter hate, when it used to actually describe more of canceling things. Like, a bunch of people would gang up to cancel a YouTube personality that all of a sudden they decided they didn't like for some really inane reason, for some arbitrary reason. Like, somebody could get canceled overnight, and that's why you should be worried about cancel culture. That's when the term actually had some value and had some decency, was when you could be worried about being canceled as like somebody in the entertainment business who already had a lot of influence and a lot of, like, what's the word, market share. Somebody who already had a lot of market share could get canceled overnight because Twitter is so powerful, or like the mob mentality of Twitter can rise up unexpectedly so easily and destroy any YouTube personality. Like, nobody's safe. We got to worry about cancel culture. And now it's like we're just describing like it with all the protest issues. Like, anybody who's on the side of the protesters that wants to get mad at somebody who's against protesting, or just getting mad at somebody who has cornrows for whatever reason, like, that person gets canceled and the person with cornrows had to apologize. The point is that Twitter got mad at this store owner who was a white person that had cornrows because she was culturally appropriating or whatever, so she got canceled. So, like, you can apply that term that way. It's just that we weren't doing that a month ago, or if not a month ago, like 2 months ago. It's still just more applied to entertainment people. But now it just applies to everybody. But you see how the term rapidly evolves. I'd say the term fake news did the same thing. Like the term fake news actually was first touted most strongly by the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world to describe conservative outlets. Definitely, that was the origin of it. Is that like CNN and MSNBC were describing probably like Drudge Report, but especially Breitbart News and Infowars type of websites as fake news. So CNN and MSNBC created the term, but then it became ubiquitous across liberal and conservative because Trump just started tweeting fake news about everything. So he made the term universal. But like, I guess making the term universal is like the same in that sense as making it making it usable by both the left and the right, whereas it was just usable by the left originally. But the term evolved to be over everybody when Trump like made it against the left too, and then it just really caught on at that point. But it's like cancel culture kind of something similar. We see now that it's crossed over to the point that like left and right are both using it, and we don't even know. It's like a fake news, really. We don't even know what is to say about it. Like everything is getting canceled. Like now we're just using it to describe whatever. We're just using it to describe silence. We're just using cancel culture to describe somebody who gets canceled, like just somebody who like we're just using it to describe somebody who has to deal with a lot of like Twitter hate, really, or whatever. But like I like the term better when it applied to cancel culture, just for entertainment. I think it's funny because it's funny that we would really hate cancel culture as far as the way that it applies to entertainment, because it's like nobody hated it when Entertainment and Extra and TMZ were capping people in the 2000s decade. Like that was cancel culture, wasn't it? We just didn't recognize it to be that, and everybody thought it was hilarity and tons of fun when a new celebrity was hated on by everybody. Everybody used to think that that was lots of fun, cancel culture, when like as far as the canceling that applied to celebrities in the 2000s, like Lindsay Lohan got pretty vehemently canceled, I would say, by the TMZs of the world. Not that they necessarily had TMZ when Lindsay Lohan was doing her thing, but like everybody got on board with canceling her at some point because she was a celebrity that at some point didn't fit in with the celebrity culture. And people wonder why Hollywood becomes such an echo chamber. It's because everybody in there is terrified of their celebrity being destroyed by paparazzos, which is the plural of that is paparazzi. A paparazzo is a singular of paparazzi. Isn't that insane? But people are worried about it's because they're not going to speak out and start to become Republican because they'll get canceled. Anybody who slightly doesn't fit in the celebrity community, who's already become a celebrity, is pretty much outcast immediately the second they decide they don't fit in with the mold, because there's just a mold that you have to fit. That's why it becomes an echo chamber. Every one of them says the same things, because Hollywood is just a giant cartel where everybody is in it for everybody in the cartel. Everybody's in for the same motivations. They have to be the same people and like have the same motivations as everybody else. I mean, as long as it had power. And so like cartels fall in and out of power, as we well know. And we well know that. Everybody knows that. And it's like they'll cancel Mel Gibson just because like he had a bad moment. He had a bad tape that got released to the paparazzi, and then the paparazzi blowed up, and then the country decided, oh, Mel Gibson is really stupid, just the way that the paparazzi and then the intermediary paparazzi mediums like TMZ describe it to us. Like the way that they describe it to us is exactly how it is. Like everybody was perfectly fine with canceling celebrities the same way that the term cancel culture developed to describe like an all of a sudden canceling of your fame. Like we were fine with that in the 2000s. And like Shia LaBeouf pretty much got canceled because at some point Hollywood decided he was too weird, and they canceled him, and everybody in the country was on board with it, and they had a lot of fun making fun of all these people that got canceled. And now, but now it's like, oh, people get like, you got to watch out for the canceling process, as if now we recognize it's evil, like it wasn't evil before. Like it's total hypocrisy, really, that you would, as long as you're extending it to entertainment. But I'm just saying, like, the weight of that you would extend it to entertainment, like, we kind of it loses its dignity, because it is extended now to basically anybody who just gets a lot of hate on Twitter or whatever. Like, you get canceled. Like, we're worried about, but that's just the right that's conservatives taking it and politicizing it. Like, once it becomes politicized, then it loses its luster for what it was. And so it's kind of like, the term will be destroyed. We don't really have to worry about, the term will be destroyed, but it also doesn't have any value. We've destroyed it by making it valueless, because it applies to everything. Same as fake news. We eventually destroyed it because we realized it applied to everything, because all the news is fake, really. It's fake to some extent. It's fake, like, news on the left is fake according to the right, and news on the right is fake according to the left. So all of the news is fake. And those are the two agendas that any news outlet is appealing to, as long as it exists, because to make money, it has to slightly appeal to one of the two, or if it doesn't at the beginning, it does trend toward that over time, so that it's discovered which way they're leaning. Like, all the news organizations do lean one of the ways, and then so they are fake to the agenda that they don't lean towards, and so all news is fake. And at some point we realized that fake news applied to everything. We made it ubiquitous, and then we shed the term, basically, or at least it's not in main conversation, but it's just that some terms have a lifespan that way, where they have a giant boom, like they have a giant atomic bomb type of boom that it covers all of culture for a period of time, and then it goes away. But, like, that's just an accelerated, some words have an accelerated rate of change, or just a potency with them that they can hit at the right time. Like, that's a property that some terms can have, but it's not necessarily a property, but it could be a property. Like, if you're to think about canceling, like, the word cancel, just the word cancel, maybe that there's a property with it that makes it act like an atomic bomb across the entire culture at its height, or at the point that culture uses it the most, like at the height of its peak before it starts to go down. If you're to look at every word as having a lifespan where it peaks at some point, which maybe. So then it'd be interesting to think about popularity. That is kind of just about peaking at some point. So, like, what's the properties of that word as far as it peaking and become popularity? Like, does that ever go away? Popularity, it would never go away. How could popularity as a term ever go away? Okay, so here's the thing. I was watching this thing, and it was like, so I was watching this video on YouTube, and it was, but I was watching this thing, but it's like, who wants to hear that? Who wants to hear it? It's like a gimmick, like it's a gimmick, but it's like, it's not a gimmick. What does a gimmick do? That's what I want to know. A gimmick. Think about the word. I'm telling you, think about gimmick, and then think about what it means for a gimmick to be a gimmick. Like, go that far above it, have this metaphysical view of every single word. Like, especially if you do that with the word consider. Consider what it means to consider something. Like, consider consideration. Consider meditating on something, or letting an idea expand in front of you. Consider dwelling on something. Consider consideration. Wasn't consider it. Consider what it means to think about considering it. Like, that you would consider it, like, consider consideration. How do you consider? Or if you don't, like, think of you're a person that doesn't intersect with consideration at all, then you're Alex Jones. You don't consider anything. You're Alex Jones, then you don't consider anything. Like, he doesn't consider a fucking thing. That's the reason everybody is so afraid of him, especially on the left. They're like, oh my God, somebody who doesn't consider things? Holy shit, that's not an acceptable person in society. Everybody has to intersect with consideration to some extent. We're really worried about what he find to be useful in his conversation. Like, he doesn't speak himself through consideration of any kind. Like, that characteristic can't be found in him. And so the media is terrified because they don't recognize that to be a real person. They're horrified. They're afraid of Alex Jones. Like as if he's not a real person, as if Alex Jones isn't a real person just because he doesn't intersect with consideration. But seriously, he doesn't consider a thing. Like, he doesn't consider the weight of his words or the impact of like what he's saying. He doesn't care about how it's connected. He's just throwing it out there. Doesn't consider a thing. Like, that's all it is. I'm not saying pro or against. Like, anyway, so society worries about people that they don't understand. Also, society worries about people that don't check all the boxes that they need to. Like, you have to have this level of consideration with the words that you're saying. Like, they're terrified. The left is terrified with Alex Jones because he's taking no time to think about what you're supposed to say. Like, he's not considerate. Oh my God, he's inconsiderate. Holy shit. Like, oh fuck, he's the worst kind of person possible. Like, that's an absolute evil to them. Like, an Alex Jones would hit an absolute evil box to them because they're like, they probably really want you to consider. Like, consideration is probably a fundamental part of the liberal ideology, so that you consider everything before you talk. Like, you have to consider, you have to think about it, you have to be considerate. You can't just talk, because just talking, like, you don't want to act like you have an opinion. Like, it's a liberal ideology to say that you have to dwell before you say whatever it is that you're going to say. And definitely liberal ideology, I mean, that's just like, you just get into liberal ideology, I mean, it's just like the liberals and the conservatives and the liberals and like, do you ever hear Ben Shapiro talk? Do you ever hear that guy talk? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting the way that he talks? Like, of course he talks really fast, and that's like just what he already does. So that's just like biologically what he does. Like, you ever hear Joe Rogan talk incessantly just about biology? Like, that's just a buzzword that he can't escape from. Like, well, it comes down to your biology. Like, well, if you look at it, it's just your biology. Like, that's how he views life. That's how he filters life, Joe Rogan. He like filters it through biology. Like, it has to be biological or whatever. Sometimes to the extent that you don't even know, like, it just sounds really general coming out of his mouth. Like, he just repeats it over because it became rhetoric to him. But even to the point that it is like rhetoric, and he has the same intention behind using biology as he did every other time he used biology. So that's why it became rhetorical, him talking about biology. He just talks, he's like, every conversation he has, like, especially with people that are like more intelligent with him, which it's not like there are a lot of the people that he has on that are more intelligent than him, but there's some person that's like Ben Gortzel, who's like whatever he is, he's one of the leaders in AI development. He leads an AI development team. He's one of the leaders in the world. This Ben Gortzel guy that he had on, who's like who's just a genius in a lot of areas, and like a genius in cryptocurrency and that kind of thing. Like, he was trying to argue a point that he disagreed with Ben Gortzel. Joe Rogan was, and he was like going back to, well, your biology, it's because your biology, it tells you this and this and this. Like, Joe Rogan's really adamant about it, but that's just because it's his worldview. You know, he can't escape from it. Like, it doesn't, when he hears something that slightly contradicts it, he's going to be confused about it. But like, why would Joe Rogan have any reason to believe that his worldview wasn't the best one, or at least one of the best, seeing as that he got tons of money and fame just by recording himself for 10 years in a row, like, his opinions. Like, he would think that his opinion was one of the higher ones. Like, he would have more reason to defend his opinion, like, the more popularity that you got, because your popularity would reflect that you were saying truthful things. So it's like, popularity. Did you hear what I said? Did you hear everything that I said? Did you hear that? Did you understand what I said? Did you hear what I said? So I have about 30 points that I need to finish up on. Let me think what the fuck I was talking about before this. No, okay. So I was talking about popularity. This is one of the points I didn't follow up on. And I watched an interview that Dave Portnoy did with Donald Trump, and Dave Portnoy started off the interview by saying to Donald Trump, like, oh, I watched an Ali G interview that you did, where Ali G is a character that Sacha Baron Cohen was playing in the 2000s, probably circa like 2007 or 2006. Like, Ali G is rapper, I guess, that Sacha Baron Cohen is pretending to be, because Sacha Baron Cohen pretends to be people. He's pretending to be a rapper. He wears an Allen Iverson jersey. Yeah. Okay, so like Dave Portnoy said, I saw an interview that you did with Sacha Baron Cohen pretending to be Ali G, and he's like, that was the only Donald Trump, Sacha Baron Cohen interviewed a number of different people as Ali G, and Dave Portnoy was saying, Donald Trump, you were the only one that saw through the interview, saw that Sacha Baron Cohen was being fake, and Donald Trump saw through it right away. And so then I went and watched the video of the interview, which is also on YouTube, which is nice about YouTube because everything that anybody refers to is a video that you can watch, interestingly enough. And that's what entertainment is being built on, is that everything is a video that you can watch. And so when somebody comments on it, you can go and watch the video. And that's the importance of commenting on it, is that all of it is available, like what you would comment on. And so then we have people building their entire careers about just commenting on a video or commenting about a conversation they had with somebody who commented on a video. Like they can comment on, this is the conversation I had with this person, reflecting on the conversation about when we conversed about this YouTube video. It's just like endless smear, spiral, fractal, endless like commenting, pontificating on previous pontifications of people. Like people build entire YouTube channels around this, or build entire podcasts around just or that, talking about conversations that they previously had, or commenting on other people's conversations, or commenting on other people's podcasts. But you already know that. So it's like, of course you already, like, I'm so interested in what that's something that you already can pick up on. So anyways, I went and watched this video that Ali G, Sacha Baron Cohen, pretending to be this guy that he's interviewing Donald Trump, and Donald Trump saw through the interview within a couple minutes. And then I watched this video where Sacha Baron Cohen was being interviewed by James Corden about the fake interview he did with Donald Trump, and Sacha Baron Cohen was like, oh yeah, Donald Trump was there for like 7 minutes and didn't see through. He's lying about seeing through the interview, but you can go and watch the video and see pretty clearly that it only lasted about a minute, and Donald Trump was seeing through it the entire time. So like Sacha Baron Cohen as Ali G, during this interview, before Trump walked out on it, he asked him, what's the most popular thing in the world? And Donald Trump said, music. So like that's something I have to think about. Like, is music really the most popular thing in the world? Like, is that right? Because you don't write that off. That's actually like, that's an answer you have to think about. Is it really music? That's what he said. Music is the most popular thing in the world. And like the comments underneath it were like, oh, that was a really good response. And then the replies to the comments were like, the replies to the comment that was a good response was like, oh, it's a good response because it's not a necessity to have music. Like food is a necessity, but music isn't, but is still with like current to everybody. Everybody wants music, and it's still a hobby. So I thought that was interesting. So as long as I was talking about popularity, but before I was talking about popularity, I was like, so this is like dream within a dream within a dream, kind of like Inception was. I was talking about popularity within a dream, and that was within the dream of something about cancel culture, probably. Like, but what the fuck? Like, I have to try to just get back around to it, or let myself revolve back around to what I was originally saying, rather than that I have to try to remember what it was that I was saying. Because the point I'm making is just that cancel culture is like what the hell? I wish I knew what I was originally saying. I wanted to say that, or I was talking about how cancel culture will cancel like Shia LaBeouf or Mel Gibson just for not fitting in, or whoever they want, and like everybody was fine with that and enjoyed it, but now we're like afraid of cancel culture. But it's because the media is generally blowing up cancel culture to be this big thing that we're supposed to be afraid of. But that anybody would be afraid of it at all is just kind of silly, because cancel culture just refers to, like, cancel culture, it just refers to like that something would get canceled probably means that it was about to get canceled anyway, or like that was probably going to happen. Like, in some ways, cancel culture just applies to like you trying to survive in the world, like whatever you are as entertainment, whatever your persona, whatever you are, that you want to keep your channel surviving, you would encounter challenges. Like, it's just kind of the media's relationship to cancel culture is the same as their relationship to death, or like that they would blow up like random incidents of homicide or anything like that. They're afraid of horrible things that happen. It's just the same as like the media being afraid of, because if somebody gets canceled, that is the same as them dying. Like Ellen DeGeneres is basically being canceled just because enough information came out that she's like really mean, and she wants to cancel her show as a result of all the pressure that she's gotten. So she's like, her show is canceled. That's a result of cancel culture, I would say. And like, it's just true that some things don't survive, but like, it was just going to happen at some point anyway. Like every organization would die at some point, and cancel culture, it's just like that the media would be afraid of it. They're afraid of an accelerated rate of change that's brought about by the pandemic. I think the pandemic, since we're all inside and we're all just only able to speak ourselves through things like Twitter, like things are getting canceled faster virtually, like, and entertainment platforms get canceled faster. We're cycling through things faster and killing off things that we don't deem to be essential faster, because it's an accelerated rate of change. But you see, it's an accelerated rate of change with not just that it's cancel culture, but just the economy is doing that, like, naturally. Like, you could apply cancel culture as a term to the economy, because the economy, like JCPenney and Pier 1 got canceled. They're done. They failed. You could call that canceling, but it's just they died. They died. And a lot of the entertainment that's getting canceled, it's not like they can't revive themselves as something else. It's just that the current situation calls for you to be something else than what you are. Like as long as the current situation kills you off, that means that you weren't relevant to the current situation, and you will have to reinvent yourself if you're somebody in entertainment, or if you're a corporation, or you, like, whatever you were is being killed off because the time doesn't allow for it, because you have to be adaptable to this situation. It's very, in a lot of senses, it's very difficult to be adaptable to this situation. So like so you have to have a kind of company or platform or identity or whatever, like, going forward. As long as you want to survive, you have to have a company or YouTube channel that is able to adapt to lots of situations if you want to survive, if you don't want to get canceled. It's just like things get canceled, but we might make a bigger deal of it now because because we notice that it's an accelerated rate of change of canceling, and it is that because it's a situation like a pandemic. But in the same way that war is an accelerated rate of change, but like, it's not, obviously it's not as bad as war. And so I would wonder what the connection is exactly. But I'm saying, like, it's an accelerated rate of change in the pandemic because JCPenney and Pier 1 were going to be canceled anyway. Like, they were going to fail as a business. They were going to collapse in like 3 years. So is it that bad that they end now as opposed to in 3 years from now? Like, they're going to go out of business. Macy's is going to go out of business. It's just happening faster because because of the pandemic. We're in a time when things are getting canceled faster. We're burning off the dead wood faster, but like, what is actually essential to us will shine through, or like, we'll be able to make it through a situation like this, really, is the case, because society evolves to destroy authorities and then build up new ones in their place that are better substitutes, And so it doesn't matter that JCPenney's went bankrupt. Like, they were going to go bankrupt in a few years. We were already trending that way with retail. It's just like, retail has been in the middle of a cancel culture for like 20 years. And it's just not, you don't see it as that, as like it's any retailer is being canceled, because the rate at which they're being canceled isn't very fast. It's slowly developing over the past 20 years. All these retailers are going out of business, but it's like a boom for all of them going out of business when in a time like a pandemic, because it's an accelerated rate of change of us canceling shit, or even canceling YouTube channels, or just that, like, things are evolving faster the same way they would in a war. But like, a war is an accelerated rate of change because wartime calls for all these new technologies to be developed that come to the forefront as new ways of dealing with like a war. Like, war is just change. Like, you see all the people that die, like something needed to happen to cause all these people to die, but like, it's just kind of an exhausting of emotion from all these countries at once, so to speak. Like, I don't want to trivialize it, but it is just kind of like something that's happening, and then the world has to deal with the war. They have to deal with all this death and trying to prevent death, but they have to deal with trying to survive in a more difficult situation. But like challenge is going to cause you to change faster the more challenging the situation. And what's more challenging than like World War II, for instance? Like World War II is a very accelerated rate of change. It brought to the forefront like radar as a technology. Like radar had to be developed faster because it was a necessary thing to develop in order for survival, because like you get desperate when it's a survival time, and then that causes you to change more rapidly. But it's a similar thing with a pandemic, I guess. Like survival kind of comes to the forefront, especially for businesses, and especially for businesses, they will have to probably do things or like be desperate in order to survive. So like if a business is about to go under, they'll probably have to find a way out of it, or find some loophole, or develop some new technology to reinvent themselves in order to change. And like that new technology will help the world out in this way or this way, like in unexpected ways. Like new technologies that develop often have unexpected consequences that benefit the world, as long as they're like a new technology. It just depends on how the ability of that technology to be eventually ubiquitous or whatever. And I'm speaking in generalities, but like speaking in generalities, certainly. I mean, if I'm just talking technology developed, but like computers came to the forefront in World War II also, like were invented then eventually. And now we see what technology arose from computers as a result of World War II, because World War II was an accelerated rate of change that brought to the forefront these new technologies. And it's like the pandemic is doing that too. It's just that we come up with a term like cancel culture to describe how we're afraid of death, sort of. Like it's kind of like a term like COVID that we can use to blame stuff on. We're just like COVID, that's our reason for not going out, or for not opening up businesses, or whatever, or it's just something to blame, or like that we can relate it to Trump and blame Trump for it. Like Trump is like someone you blame, like the same way like I'm saying Trump, cancel culture, and COVID, all of those are terms that you just blame your fear of dying on. Like they're just terms that you but like we come up with cancel culture to describe the things that are dying in a time of accelerated rate of change, when that's just a natural progression of things. Like people, corporations survive, but like have to survive or not survive. You have to survive. Survival comes to the forefront in the time of a pandemic. And so things get canceled, like, and not just survival physically, but like of a corporation, that it doesn't get destroyed economically, because economically is like is analogous to physical life and death in some ways, like in the life and death of a business, because they have to get money in order to survive. So it's just interesting to think about then that like the money that you need, or like the relationship of money to a business, and how that's like the relationship of people to like how people survive, and how that's analogous to how businesses survive, and then what you need to do in order to survive as a person, and how that's analogous to what a business needs to do to survive, which is that they need to get money, and a person needs to drink water and sleep, or whatever. They need to survive. Anyway, it doesn't, like, forget about that analogy. Just understand that central to what I'm saying, the central point that I'm making, is that it's more desperate times in a pandemic, especially for businesses and for people, and that causes things to get destroyed. It's not like you should be worried about cancel culture. And for cancel culture, as it applies to entertainment, it's greatly diminishing some people's personas, or like causing them to reinvent themselves in some cases, or in some cases totally canceling people. But like canceling that just has to happen. Like society has to get rid of authorities that aren't essential. And it's like, so that's the point that I was making, because I was watching Ben Shapiro, and he said that he was applying cancel culture the way that he was applying it. And so it's like, it dismays me that, like, just, you get think about entertainment and all that shit in the 2000s. That's the whole point of this episode, okay? That's what's interesting about what I'm saying to myself. That's what's interesting about it. Is like cancel culture was, we piss on Shia LaBeouf because Hollywood decided he didn't fit in one day. And so we canceled the fuck out of him. Like, to the point that him as a celebrity, as a person, like, he should be embarrassed about who he is. But the same with Lindsay Lohan, but like that's just a greedy, consuming, awful, like, trait that was prevalent in society and is still prevalent in society. It's just like, that's the whole thing. It's just like the E! Entertainment, the extra and the TMZ, the Lindsay Lohan. The TMZ and the Lindsay Lohan and the extra and the Shia LaBeouf and the Mel Gibson and the TMZ and the way that they would cancel people. And because Hollywood was totally on board with the cancellation of those people. They're like, oh, well, they fell off the wagon. It's not like Hollywood cared. They just kept chugging right along when they lost one of their comrades or whatever. One of their comrades, was separated from the chaff or whatever you say to describe that. Like, they're, oh, well, we lost Lindsay Lohan from our cartel because the country decided that they wanted to hate her one day. Like, Lindsay Lohan, I guess we decided that we don't like, think about what we do to a Lindsay Lohan in terms of our country canceling them and how little remorse we have for it. When it's like, oh, her life was destroyed because we thought she was an idiot for getting addicted to drugs, because we had no forgiveness for that kind of thing. We're like, oh, the country decided that her behavior was disgusting because she had a really difficult childhood and then got hooked on drugs at some point. And then we shit on her for doing that. And nobody gave a fuck about shitting on her. Isn't that interesting? But now we're like, oh shit, for something getting canceled, isn't that horrible? That cancel culture demonized somebody and destroyed them. It's interesting that we're all moral about it now, is what I'm saying, especially when you compare it to, because that's the equivalent expression of the same thing 10 years ago. It is, because what else would have been cancel culture 10 years ago? There wasn't a situation that called for the cancellation of a lot of things. But if there was one, it was like Hollywood trying to figure out who should be canceled and TMZ profiting off of like, everybody in Hollywood was probably terrified that they were going to be the next news story and that their career was going to end. Like, that's why everybody in there has to be on the same page. Like, it has to say all the right things, because like the second Mel Gibson is known to be slightly a Republican is basically at the point that they're allowed to be totally demonized. Like, if you're slightly Republican, Mel Gibson's out of the picture, or just if you don't fit in. Like, who else? Like Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen just didn't fit in. Like, he sounded weird. And everybody in the country's like, oh, that guy's a bullshitter. Fuck him. We're canceling him. No longer a celebrity. He's an idiot. Like Justin Bieber. Same thing, basically. It's just I would say like the generation above mine is a big reason for that, I would say, for that entire climate of the E! Entertainment extra TMZ, because they need to watch, because what are they going to do besides like watch TV and consume the destruction of people in Hollywood? Like, whatever generation is above mine, whether you'd call that Gen X or Baby Boomer, like, of course, they love the destruction of this through the TMZs. They're the ones that can consume that the most and love the destruction of people who are like millennials. Really, they don't like people who have talent, like Shia LaBeouf or Lindsay Lohan or Justin Bieber. They don't like people who have lots of talent that are millennials, because people who have talent, according to Baby Boomers and Gen X, are supposed to be from their generation. And so they have all these people in their generation that are producers of, like, because they control that or whatever. They control the medium, that are all these people in their generation that are producers of intermediary paparazzi networks, like that all those people, generally speaking, are Generation X probably, or something like that. And they really try to get everybody on the bandwagon to destroy young and talented people. Because if you are a negatively aspiring and thinking person of an older generation, you're going to get pissed at the youth. And the result of that is we see the careers of people who are really talented in Hollywood get destroyed, or at least some of them, because old people that are pissed off at the young like to feed off the youth as much as they can, or destroy it, or just take advantage of it. And like, that's what you see with a cancel culture in the 2000s with like a TMZ. I know the TMZ arose later at some point. Also, like TMZ now, they're just a politically charged. It's just a politically charged endeavor. Interestingly enough, like I knew that the term Karen had died when TMZ had gotten a hold of it to describe somebody who wasn't wearing a mask as a Karen. And then, okay, so you destroyed Karen because you made it a politically charged term when people used to have fun with it. And the fun died when you made it political. So I guess if you want to kill a term, just try to make it political, because then the other side, like, they're going to be like, oh, she's a Karen for not wearing a mask, but then like, she's a Karen for not wearing a mask. That's not the point of it, because at the point that you're making it political, you are trampling over the interesting part of the term at all, or the value of the term. You're trampling it over it to make it political in that sense. It's just that the particular way that they made it political there was, they're like, oh, a Karen she wasn't wearing a mask, or somebody who was arguing over wearing a mask or something. And so they just took a Karen, like TMZ took Karen to mean just any woman that argues over something, even though that's not what it meant. And then they use that to further their political purposes, because TMZ is apparently a political organization for the left now, just based on a couple of their headlines that I've read recently, when that wasn't the case before. They used to be like unbiasedly trying to just destroy anybody in Hollywood. Didn't matter left or right. But I mean, I guess they've always kind of been on the left, in terms of that they would target anybody who was slightly Republican on the right, probably, or somebody who was more Republican as a celebrity would get more press to be destroyed, and as a result of organizations like TMZ. But like, it's still, you wouldn't have called that politically charged back then. You wouldn't have. But it's more easy to see that TMZ is politically charged now by that they run headlines against people who aren't wearing a mask, or they get mad at somebody who, like, I thought TMZ was supposed to cover celebrities. They're just putting out political headlines now. Isn't that interesting? They're just putting out political headlines. It doesn't have anything to do with celebrities, because there's no reason, because nobody's going to read a headline about a celebrity, because nobody cares about celebrities, or what, like Hollywood celebrities. So TMZ is just putting out political articles against people who don't wear masks, and it's easy to see that they're on the left. We know that you're on the left right away, whatever news organization you are, because you would say that because you're against people who don't wear a mask, or you run a headline against people who don't wear a mask. Like, we know that you're on the left immediately. So like, yeah, like, fuck you, Lindsay Lohan, fuck you, Shia LaBeouf, because you don't fit in with Hollywood, and also we don't like your talent. Like, you're too or whatever. Like Miley Cyrus, sort of the same thing. Miley Cyrus, because what is the reason for all of us ubiquitously hating her character just because she went a little wild? Like, what's the reason for that? What's the purpose? Like, what's so negative about that Miley Cyrus went crazy? Like, she was very enthusiastic about her personality for a couple of years. Like, she was really just being herself. Like, I thought that's what we wanted out of young female stars. Like, I thought that's what we wanted out of our female archetypes and, like, heroes, you know. I thought that's what we wanted out of them, was for them to be really enthusiastic. Except that, like, if Miley Cyrus is really being who she is being a really powerful, outspoken woman. The media complex tears her down for that. They destroy her. They're like, oh, that behavior is false, or too negative, or scary. Like, you're being too much. Like, you're doing all the wrong things. Like, they tell her off for being more powerful. The media complex tells female heroes off for being more powerful. Like, hypocritically enough, you know. Like, somebody like Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus is a powerful female figure, but the media destroys her for being that. Like, the same with Lindsay Lohan, or anybody who actually has lots of talent. They destroy them. Like, what the fuck is the reason for that? It's a dumb fucking society sometimes. Not in all ways, but, like, shit like that just goes unnoticed. Like, I'm pissed because Miley Cyrus is a powerful female figure that doesn't get recognized for it, because the media that advocates for powerful female figures so much just thinks that she's a little bit icky in the way that she carries herself, and so they destroyed her for when she was icky, like whatever was happening with her 5 to 7 years ago. they're like, oh, we don't like that you're being naked, so we're gonna cancel you. Like the media is they've been canceling people. Like that the media would get mad at canceling is total fucking bullshit, because they've been canceling. That's all that they exist to do, is to cancel people that they would be afraid of canceling, or that they would run headlines about, or that it's become a thing that all of society is talking about, cancel culture. I know that it's not just like a media thing, but it is something that it's not just a media thing at this point. It was maybe like a month ago, but the term rapidly evolved to the point that now we're just applying it to everybody who gets lots of hate on Twitter is being canceled. And so the term will fall out of fashion eventually, because we've made it ubiquitous. Like it should fall out of fashion pretty soon, seeing as that it doesn't have any value anymore, because it can be applied to everything. So that's how you kill a term. So congratulations, we're afraid of cancel culture. We're destroying it by talking about it. We talk it out of existence by all of us understanding its use, and then therefore distributing its use to everybody, to the point that it's impossible to see its significance in any direction, since everybody has an interpretation on it. So everybody has an interpretation on it, so it's insignificant because it applies to everybody. And so everybody is exactly different from everybody else. And if they all have an interpretation on cancel culture, that destroys the term, because it doesn't have any value anymore, because you have to have value in order to exist. So... and that's just what I'm saying. You kill off cancel culture, TMZ. You kill off a Miley Cyrus because she's a powerful female figure or whatever. That's what you want. You don't. It's because the media doesn't actually fucking want that. They just want clicks and views, and they're useless garbage, every one of them. It's to the point now that if you hear somebody on any YouTube channel, anybody who's an influencer, wherever you hear them on a podcast or anything, if you hear somebody say this, like, they're talking about news that they heard. They're trying to compare resources that they've heard in order to put forth a plot, in order to put forth the scenario that they want to for like their YouTube video or their podcast episode. They're trying to put together a podcast episode, and so they're comparing resources they've heard in order to take it in the right direction, to inform you on what they know about it, so that you know what level to trust in them. And they're like, so I heard, and they just use the opinion of somebody on TikTok in order to guide the way that they go with their podcast episode or YouTube video. And they're like, oh, this was just the opinion of somebody on TikTok. It wasn't like a New York Times article or anything like that. It was just somebody on TikTok. If you hear that, you should just start swearing or something. Like you should be repulsed by that. You should cuss out verbally, audibly in the middle of hearing that, like back at the TV, because it's like if somebody says that at this point, like, oh, it wasn't a real article, it wasn't like it was a New York Times article, you know that they're just trying to make a stand about that news still exists, or that we're still supposed to uphold the sanctity of reporters. You know that they're just trying to make some stand that nobody actually believes in, and that they're just being a bullshitter. And so you should curse them out in the name of trying to destroy the New York Times, so that we all start a conversation about destroying the New York Times in the same way we destroy cancel culture, so that everybody has a negative opinion of the New York Times, or just an opinion on them, so that it applies to everybody. Because it's not like everybody... I don't know. That's probably not true. That's probably not true that everybody could have an opinion on the New York Times and that's what would destroy it. I'm just saying that seems to be true for like an idea in some ways. Whatever. I mean, I'm just a bullshitter. But how would that work if you were to like... I'm just hoping that I outlive the New York Times and CNN. I hope I live to see them go entirely bankrupt. That's the world I want to live in. I want to see MSNBC, probably Fox News. Sure, Fox News. MSNBC, but like Fox News, like Fox, whatever. I want to see them all destroyed. I want to live beyond them. I want to live beyond the news industry. I want to survive beyond them. I want to live longer. I want them to be canceled before me. That's all that it is. And thank you. That's been my time. See you later. That was great. It was great talking to you from my end. I would say it was great for all these words to be spoken, for you to hear them from my end to yours. And I'm glad for it to be done now, and I thank you very much. And like Ben Shapiro, like I'm glad for it to be done now. It was very fun for me. I was doing as best as I could, and it was like, what is Ben Shapiro? It would be hard to do an impression of Ben Shapiro. That's the whole point of like, that's why it's like, do you listen to that guy talk? You could always listen to that guy talk forever. Who's going to be able to do an impression of that besides somebody who talks really fast? He's like, It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Colin Kaepernick is like, like, he's always talking about Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick is out in the world. It's ridiculous. You try to capitalize off of being in the media. Try to capitalize off of liberal politics. The identity politics of the situation is liberal politics. And Colin Kaepernick is trying to capitalize on making monetization off of the money just for going to Nike and gets lots of money, like whatever way he does it. You know, if you could do, you should try to do your best Ben Shapiro impression so we can cancel Ben Shapiro. I'm just kidding. Don't. It's fine. Like it's just interesting that he's gaining so much of an audience right now because he's the only one telling the truth. Isn't that interesting? He's like the only one really saying what's on people's minds, so he's getting a big audience. But yeah, that's been my time. I thank you for this. It was really great. You're a great audience. I'm glad for you listening to me. Please come back again. It was really great to finally find the level of enthusiasm that I represented myself well so that I could do the intro correctly and then maintain it through the body and then come to an outro and try to live up to the outro so that the outro is what it is. So that I meet the definition of an outro, so that I be what an outro is supposed to be with my outro. I explain myself correctly through the outro so you know it's the outro, but it's just like it has to be in line with that you have conversation that you're ending as long as it's the outro. So it's like I'm really glad that I was here. You see what I'm doing so that I explain that it's an outro because as you see, it was very glad for you to be the audience for it. Was great. Here's my time. I've got to go off the stage now. It's really great to talk to you. Here it is ending. This is how it ends. And then you speak it into ending existence. Not just that it's that you try to live up to an outro, but you do actually end it, which is the point of an outro. It is actually the end of the podcast. But as long as it's the outro, then it just doesn't have to be can be a long one. It's like how about we have different interpretations on an outro? Like how about the outro is just the entire thing? How about the outro is just the entire thing? Why do we not live by those standards? Like the beginning is an outro, you outro the entire way. I guess that's what a crescendo is, or whatever the opposite of crescendo. Like you just outro the entire way or intro the entire way. It's not like life doesn't need that too. Like life needs you to intro your whole way. What if you live that way? What if that's how you converse with people? What if you're nothing but a walking intro? You should really look at yourself. You should take a step outside of yourself metaphysically so you can look outside of yourself to see if you're just a walking intro. But maybe you can figure that out by understanding if like your conversation with somebody appears as just a walking intro, so that if that's a microcosm of all your relationships in life, you know, like I was saying before. But that's my Ben Shapiro impression. This whole thing was my Ben Shapiro impression. Thank you for being monetization Colin Kaepernick for Nike. I'm marginalization of Colin Kaepernick, and I apologize for that. And this was my time. And but it's just like who wants to listen to that? Who wants it? But I'm just trying to sound interesting. That's the whole point. I'm just trying to sound interesting the entire time. But that was my outro, and I do have to cut it off. All good things have to come to an end, and I thank you for indulging in my self-indulgence today. I appreciate it, and thank you.